I think perhaps, if I may, I'd like to start the panel discussion now that we've heard, I hope I don't offend anybody by saying maybe two more youth-based perspectives from the ADB. I'd like to hear from Daniele. Obviously, we know he's had 30 years of experience. Over 20 of that has been with the ADB. We know you're still young at heart, so no judgments at all there. But I'd like to know how you feel the youth movement that Lee's described, that Shreti described in the water project. How is this a part of ADB's grander vision? How does the youth and environment fit together in your mind?
I think that both presentations have been great in really channeling a lot of enthusiasm and the main perspective that the youth really want to engage and want to be really an active part in delivering the SDG and the Sustainable Development Agenda agreed last year in New York, and the Climate Paris Agreement part of that overall big picture. It's the first time, and one of the other quotes from the Rio document was that this may be the last generations to have the opportunity to address the environment and climate crisis. At the same time, this is the first generation which may see the end of poverty. Just to complement, I don't know if it was you or who was there to have actually that quote at the beginning. So there was this double, the first and the last generation. It really made an impression on me when I was reading that document. But going back to the two presentations, I really believe that there are so many entry points, and actually there are so many programs, and maybe we have to have another meeting with you, Lee, and you with you, Shruti, to have a look at the various trust funds that ADB administers, where there are millions and millions of dollars, and many of them have a number of activities which are community-based. They are basically small pilot programs, very often in the order what you were saying, 50 to 100, 200, 250,000 US dollars, which can be definitely engage and be based on youth organization or CSOs, youth managers, CSOs, or other organization of this kind. So definitely, maybe we could do some kind of systematic work to identify which of the trust funds. And some of the trust funds are sectoral, like on water, or some of them on gender or on environment. For example, I used to be involved in the management of a poverty environment program, and it was a trust fund with Norwegian and Swedish money, and ADB for more than 10 years has been implementing more than 25 sub-projects, each of them in the order of 200, 250,000 US dollars maximum. So definitely there are entry points there, and I think that there are so many areas where the youth can come in. I was just collecting some thoughts while listening to your presentation. Traditionally, what we see is more like, traditionally what we've been thinking is community-based type of approaches, monitoring at the ground level in terms of project implementation, gender elements, because after all, youth, half of the youth is actually young women and girls who are actually there to drive the agenda of gender equality, gender empowerment. But one point also I wanted to add is not only the project level, we have so much of ADB operations which are focusing on strategy work, on knowledge work, which relates to new ways of doing business, and business in a very general understanding of what and how we operate with the countries to take forward the various agendas, being water or health or energy. And I believe that the youth can really come in strongly in a number of ways. So I was saying not only project level, but also strategy level, policy dialogue that we have with certain countries. So again, through some various possible forms, we can have representatives of the youth to participate and provide input, not only through consultation, but also maybe through selected presence here and there as part of these processes in various ways. And we can explore and we can pilot and we can try new ways of doing business so that actually ADB can work with the youth, in particular the most efficient, most effective youth organization which have demonstrated in the past to actually do good work and in a way which is also adding value to the overall outcome, expected outcome of the particular process, formulating a strategy or taking forward a policy dialogue on a water management process or any other development-related policy-making decisions, when it comes to climate. And another thought I had, you mentioned climate adaptation, which is very close to my heart. When I was in the African Development Bank, I started the adaptation program about 8-9 years ago. And I believe definitely climate resilience, climate adaptation is one of the areas where the youth can do a lot, working with the local community, working at grassroots level, and working with the people basically to better adapt to the climate impacts and reduce risk, including disaster risk and the kind of risk. But it also mitigation, climate change mitigation, be energy or be transport, sustainable transport in the various sectors. There is a lot that can be done where the youth can really take forward the agenda much more aggressively than other organizations which are not so enthusiastic and energetic. So I would recommend not to forget the mitigation side. Then just to finish, because I don't want to monopolize the interventions, when it comes to the media, I think one of the key challenges that the youth have is how to best place pressure on all levels of government, central, mid, and local level, to do more and better and faster in addressing these environmental and climate issues. So you have the best talents because you are naturally the most effective communicators. You are the one blogging, Facebooking on a daily basis, even during the night. Sometimes I receive messages the following day. My God, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, especially here in the Philippines, where so many people working in call centers. So in the night also they are going through the social media. So you have the power to influence the media, and through the media and the social and non-social media, you can really influence through the journalists, but also through the various ways that you can influence the decision makers, the policy makers in the various countries, and in particular the government level, so that action can be taken much more decisively. And when I'm talking about action, I don't mean old-style, old-fashioned type of government policies of investments. I mean also all those forms of public-private action and partnerships where groups of stakeholders can come together and do things more effectively, more rapidly, and more substantively than some of the bureaucratic, old-style type of actions that government usually take. So that is an area where I see the youth having a very strong comparative advantage in terms of placing pressures on governments to do more, better, more rapidly in terms of action. Lastly, maybe one point is with respect to knowledge. Some of you may have heard that ADB in the last few years, under the leadership of our current president, Nakao, are starting more aggressively working on knowledge. And we are trying to incorporate and integrate knowledge in all our work, in our projects, in our strategies, in our policy dialogue, much more systematically, and also to make this knowledge not as something abstract, a report produced by our consultant, but rather something which is useful operationally. So even there, I see the role of the youth, especially for those youth who are involved at the ground level or involved in some of these processes, to provide precious feedback. So I wouldn't shy away from the opportunities to provide inputs into our knowledge. So when we have a workshop here in ADB presenting the findings of a particular report prepared, for example, we are now working on a new report on how best present the financial, social, and economic benefits of investing in natural capital. When we are talking about natural capital, we are talking about forests, lands, resources, we are talking about air pollution, we are talking about ecosystem more generally, we are talking about lakes, wetlands, water resources in general, but we are talking about things which are very important and crucial to sustain economic development in the medium long term. So definitely we should make sure that we also have participation from the youth in terms of whatever recommendations come out from this type of reports, because they are then translated into a number of knowledge products and also in a number of briefs, which also reach management and which then can cascade through the institution and have an impact in our colleagues. Because in principle, for example, talking again about natural resource management, natural capital investments, there is a lot of interest from our colleagues around the bank, but very often there are some kind of barriers that they are not really sure how to overcome, how to overtake, and how to meet different type of constraints and bypass them, you know, and therefore there are definitely need to get much more effective type of lessons learned and the type of evidence-based type of knowledge that can be provided to our colleagues, and making sure that they can better design projects so that the natural capital component can be included, or even an overall project to be based on a natural capital type of investments. I'll stop here, otherwise I'm talking too long.
Thank you very much. It's very comprehensive, and I think the most interesting thing that you said is from this conversation you feel like perhaps you and Lee and other of the design youth projects should talk a little bit more about where you can find more funding, where there's more gaps. So does anybody in here want a job? Anybody in here like to work with the ADB? I feel like there must be a few in here. And this type of forum, this type of discussion, that's the best thing that can happen, is you're in the spot right now where they're having that discovery. And if you are activating on the community level, that could be you that's doing something that's contributing to these outputs. I'd like to hear from Christopher now. It's a rather natural connection. I was referring to our environment as our home. So you and Habitat, you here in the Philippine office, what kind of perspective do you have on the planet and the environment through UN Habitat's lens?
On the question, UN Habitat is the UN agency for sustainability, urban development, sustainable urban development, and adequate shelter for all. But I find the two presentations very interesting because they also strike at our core mandates as an organization: water and environmental sustainability. And especially these two issues are very critical when it comes to cities. And when we talk about the urbanization process that's happening, especially in Asia, where Asia, if you really look at it, it's almost urban. And in fact, the two biggest countries, India and China, are still rural on average. But it is in these countries where you find the densest, the most dense cities. No? And in fact, in Asia, Asia has more than half of the world's megacities. So, and this process is very fast. Unlike in Europe, although Europe is basically very urban already, that process took decades and centuries to happen. In Asia, it's only happening in decades. And suddenly one city finds itself already very big. Now, how do you manage that kind of urbanization process? And what does the youth have to play in, what is their role in that process? And I find it very, very interesting because, in fact, in Asia, we are in that sweet demographic spot where you have a very young population. Many parts of the world are already aging, although we have some countries in Asia that's aging also. But we have a very young population. Our growth is very fast. And this is a very good window of opportunity where the youth and the productive youth can really take advantage of the growth so that they can contribute and become part of this growth and urbanization process. That is the demographic, the youth bulge. But that youth bulge could become a problem if, in fact, the youth will remain unemployed, they will become frustrated, and then you have things like the Arab Spring. So that's why it's very important for me to realize that, you know, as urbanization is very rapidly happening in countries like the Philippines and the rest of Asia, the youth will have to be very aware that it has a critical role to play. And some of the presentations actually pointed out very I will just select some takeaways, no? Like, I know it's very popular now that, and it's common knowledge that, in fact, it's the youth that's taking the lead when it comes to technology and social media and communication. And Daniele was saying that, in fact, the youth has that power to influence, no? And to disseminate knowledge. But remember, in technology, garbage in, garbage out. And that's why we also see we are also flooded with, social media posts that are garbage. And I like what Lee was saying earlier, that, what the youth needs now is information and knowledge. Because what can you share if in the first place you don't have quality information and knowledge to share? And that's where I think institutions like UN Habitat, ADB, can play a very important role in terms of, providing that knowledge based on our vast, experience and network and global knowledge base, make that available to the youth in age-appropriate form. Because sometimes, of course, we have a lot of information. In our case, for example, we have a lot of information, but it's so technical. Only doctors in economics or engineers can understand the information. How do we digest it so that the youth, and we're talking about a range of ages, can digest and make it meaningful to them and to their networks? Because when we look at the youth, although the presentation actually hides a million stories of very interesting youth stories, we're actually talking about youth networks also. The youth, the young people, are more energized, more active when they actually work with peers, with groups. And I think that's the power that we also have to recognize. How do we strengthen networks and groups and relationships and make that institutionalized into the processes that we promote? In UN Habitat, for example, one of our key processes is really participatory planning and design. And in a recent project that we did in 4 cities in the Philippines, we did the planning and design of very specific sites in cities. And we used the youth, we involved the youth in the planning and design of that part of the city. And you will realize that, of course, architects, urban planners will have, very high-tech ideas of how a city should be designed. But if you ask the youth, they actually have different and very fresh ideas. And they can express it not in technical terms. Give them Minecraft. They will show you how a whole city can be designed, okay? So, and that's the technology we used. We gave them Minecraft. Okay, this space, how do you design it in such a way that it will respond to your needs? Very, very surprising, innovative ideas. And also the youth is not just about dialogues, but I think when you talk about youth, you're talking about young people also who are in college, studying. You're talking about fresh graduates, young employees. In some of our community level work, like we did a rehabilitation of a creek in one city, engineering students in one university actually volunteered to conduct the hydrology study to make sure that the creek project has a very scientific basis. At the same time, when we did that rehabilitation of the area, and students from another university nearby volunteered to do the architectural study of the linear park. And by giving them that kind of responsibility, because they have skills, and then we just complemented it with senior mentors to do it with them, it actually facilitated also education for the young participants. And I think that those are examples of very concrete ways that the youth can contribute, not just to information dissemination, social media, but really contributing. Because what does the youth have that older people do not have? They have the time, they have the energy, and they have the numbers. We know that the half of the world now are young people. And therefore, if we harness that, then we have half of the world's energy and even more that we can really harness.
Excellent. Now, there's two things I think that have come up through what both of you have said that I'd actually like to ask Shruti what you think about this. We've talked about that there's an online aspect. There's definitely a connectivity that the youth has been really pioneering, be it through social media, through new technology. And then there's also this aspect of connectivity that was one of the main pillars in the water project. How do you see those two things fitting together? And can you refer back to something that both you and Lee have spoke about, which is the need for grassroots community action? How do you see all of that fitting together in the puzzle?
Thank you. So to give the example of the work of the Water Youth Network to address the questions that you asked, one is connectivity of how does it bring people together. So that's through the power of technology and social media and communications where it's able to bring people together. So I could maybe explain this through an example. There's an International River Symposium that's going to take place in New Delhi in about a month and a half. And somebody from that specific organization approached me to ask, we want someone to conduct a thoughtful session around SDG awareness, SDG water and sanitation, and who do you think we can harness to help drive this energy in the room? And the Water Youth Network I just connected with them, and they had a whole team of people working out of New Delhi on a specific project that were ready to conduct a workshop and a consultation there. So this is just to show how you can bring people and really break down barriers, and geography, distance, time doesn't matter. And this is just thanks to being proactive and having access to this communication and technology. And the other thing is connectivity, where they used something like an interactive gaming at a session at an international event, which really broke down barriers, because it didn't matter whether you were government or civil society. In real situations, you might not be able to have those conversations, but because it was a tablet and it was a technology simulated situation, it just broke down communication barriers. So I think connectivity and communication are doing those two things. And they're also facilitating actual work on the grassroots level, because you're able to channelize exactly what a specific region needs thanks to communication. And you can have actors that go out right onto the ground and do that. So today, through ADB's PDA, Pilot Demonstration Activity, we're working on a water project in Vietnam. And Water Youth Network is actually mobilizing a small CSO and a group of students in Vietnam to do a baseline research at the community level. So they're doing this through an office in Amsterdam for a project in Vietnam. And this is possible thanks to connectivity, communication, and energy and enthusiasm.
It's very inspiring, and I hope that becomes the model for more to come. Daniele, did you want to respond?
Very quickly, to actually add on the point that Shruti was making, that nowadays there is another factor which is of potentially huge benefit in terms of adding to the connectivity and the potential in quickly getting the type of support or value added that you can get from people who are already working but who are already connected and therefore can respond you within 24 hours and say, yes, here we are, and we can organize your workshop in less than a couple of days, is that the technologies are becoming cheaper and cheaper and more powerful. And I'm referring to some of the technologies for monitoring water and air quality. You can easily nowadays with a $50 air quality monitor on particulate matters check the air quality around your area where you live or around an area where you pass by and you know there is a